Hi there, Duke fans. Welcome to episode 609 of the DBR podcast, the Duke Basketball Roundup. I'm Jason Evans. I'm joined by my partner in crime, Donald Wine. Donald, it is Tuesday afternoon. My bet is that you are about to head over to the ACC tournament. Is that correct?
Yeah, so for transparency, we're recording this as the first game of the tournament has started. It's Notre Dame versus Georgia Tech. They're in approaching halftime at this point. After this is done, I'm going to take care of a couple of items here, and then I'm going to head over Miami. Unfortunately, we talk about them on the bottom half of the bracket. They are playing tonight, so I will be decked in green and orange to watch the team. But I will say, Jason, before we get to the ACC, I know we'll talk about that a little bit later. I just want to let people know that I will be obviously in town for the whole tournament. If you guys want to meet me, there's a great opportunity to do so in the lead up to the Duke game on Thursday night at City Tap House. We're going to have kind of make that our home base for Duke fans here. So come by and find me. I'll probably be there about 5:15 ish, and we'll be having drinks and dinner before we get to see our team play. So come on out. Email us, dbrpodcast@gmail.com if you're going to be in town. Would love to meet as many of you as possible. And shout out Lynn Simon, who I met over the weekend at a soccer game. He had been emailing us and conversing. We got to meet up and talk for a while at the tailgate for the U.S. game. As you may know, he was on our show last year talking about NIL and how that world was transpiring as it started. So a great guy to talk to. So shout out to Lynn Simon.
Okay, let's get to something before we get to the ACC tournament, Donald. There is something we wanted to talk about, you and me, that we regrettably didn't include when we were wrapping up the Carolina game. Lots to talk about with that Carolina game, and so we never got to this, but it is definitely a topic that needs to be discussed, and that is when the game ended, there were UNC players who went over and approached the Crazies. In fact, it's been noted by some folks that they sort of skipped the handshake line.
It was the whole team. Yeah, it was basically the whole team.
They skipped the handshake line so that they could go over and respond, taunt, answer, whatever you want to call it, with the Crazies. And in the process of them, well, let's just call it taunting. I think taunting is probably the fairest thing to call. I think even if you're going to take the Carolina fans' side of this, they were taunting the Crazies, returning the taunting, perhaps. There were a number of Duke fans who threw water, threw Cokes and stuff like that, threw their soft drinks at the Carolina team. Additionally, there's been a video that has cropped up from pregame warmups of RJ Davis taking his warm-up shots in Cameron, and a number of Duke fans are taunting him, yelling stuff at him. I've heard it alleged that someone may have used the N-word. I'm not sure I heard that.
I can say I watched the video several times. That's not what was being said. Again, people are going to take that as they will. But I've listened to it, and as a black man, I can tell you that I did not hear that word being said. So I'm fine with saying that it wasn't there.
Good. Like I said, I listened. I couldn't hear it, but I was going to, in the interest of transparency, folks have alleged it, but I think it's probably BS. But what was very audibly there was someone said, "I'm going to kill you," to RJ Davis. Now, it has been pointed out, it doesn't sound like it's a threat. In fact, someone said that it was in the context of playing someone one-on-one, like, "I'm going to kill you, man." Not like I'm going to pull out a gun or hunt you down or something actually violent. But these two incidents combined put a bit of a stain, Donald, on Duke and on the Crazies. Even though I will tell you right now, the Carolina team going up and answering or whatever, taunting the opposing fans, always a bad idea. Always a bad idea. I don't care what they've been saying to you during the game. Leave the fans out of it. Let them enjoy themselves. Let them do their thing. When the game is over, you shake hands, you go to the locker room, and you celebrate in there. You don't celebrate on an opposing team's logo. You don't celebrate by going up to the crowd and pointing at them and such. When you do that kind of thing, you're asking for trouble. And that said, throwing water bottles or drinks, whatever, at opposing players is not cool. Don't do it, Crazies. It's just not cool at all. We're the ones who look bad. Even though, like I say, the Carolina guys shouldn't have been there. Don't throw your stuff at them. It's a bad idea. And as for the taunting of RJ Davis in the pregame, I don't know. I'm not. I just don't think it didn't sound like someone making an actual threat, and I think that's a mountain being made out of a molehill.
So I'll be a little bit more direct in this. You know me, I'm a huge fan. I love the Crazies. I love Cameron. This cannot happen ever. This is not what we do. This is not what Duke is about. We have had instances where this has happened.
Is the water throwing the water or the chant or the I'm
It's
gonna
all
kill
of
you?
it. I'm gonna break it
All of
down,
it.
but
Okay.
yes, let's start with the throwing of the water. That's the easy one, right? Don't throw that. Don't do that. We literally have instances where we have some players' families who are taught not to go to some of these venues on the road because they do that to us. And if we want to be a school that says, hey, we don't like it when people throw stuff at us, we cannot turn around and respond with the same thing, right? This is not like a tit for tat. They did it, so we can do it. No, no one should be doing it, and especially us because we know better than that. I
Carlos
will also
Boozer's mom. The infamous story of
yeah,
Carlos Boozer's mom
absolutely.
at Maryland getting a Coke bottle thrown at her. Yes.
During the gone in 54 seconds game, right?
Yep.
Like right at the end, there's a reason. Let's put it this way: there's a reason why when you go to most arenas and you buy a Coke bottle or a water bottle, they remove the caps. It's because of that game. That is it. If since we know that and we know that history, we should not be mimicking that ever. The other thing is this: when we are vulgar towards players and we're vulgar towards coaches, it doesn't matter what they're doing because opponents know that they're in a no lose situation. As you mentioned, Jason, they were taunting, they were coming over to the Crazies, they were saying whatever they wanted to say. The three teams that have won in Cameron this year, Arizona, Pitt, and UNC, they all did that. But did you hear about people going, oh, that was just, classless, what Caleb Love said to the Crazies? That was classless how Blake Hinson jumped on the scorer's table. It was classless how the UNC players skipped the handshake line. They're not talking about that. They're talking about the response from the Crazies because
Amen.
everyone hates us, right? Everyone hates us. We already have that on us, and we hate the fact that everyone hates us just because we're Duke, but we can't give them fuel for the fire. When we lose, they're going to taunt Crazies because they know it's something that they can do and they can get away with it. But don't give them a reason to turn it on you. And don't give them a reason to say, oh, the Duke fans were classist. And I get it, right? We want to take the team out of the game, addressing the pregame chance, but you don't necessarily have to do it in a vulgar way. I'm not saying you can't say, choice words, right? But do it in a way where they understand that, hey, you are really just supporting your team and it's about your team. We've, we used to say like, the ref sucks, right? And then Coach K would slam on the table and then we didn't came to chant, we beg to differ, right? It's a cleaner way, it's a funny way. You know what we're trying to say, but we're not going to say the BS chant, right? Those sort of things. But at the end of the day, like I said, and it's funny this comes up, Jason, because yesterday at Duke DC in our board meeting, we had someone from Duke who was there from like communications and marketing, and he basically said, look, if you are outside of Duke and you read 5 stories in a month about Duke and 4 of them are bad, what's your perception of Duke and Duke fans and Duke alums going to be? It's going to be bad. Meanwhile, if they say, oh, Duke fans were really cool, like they welcomed us, they were funny, but they were razzing our team. They weren't classless. They weren't dipping any low things. They were just supporting their team. They made it hard on us. We had a great time. Love to come back. If you have more of those stories, then the perception goes up. But every single time, it's just like the tripping incident. It doesn't matter what Harrison Ingram did to Flip beforehand. All we're talking about is the trip. You can't do that. Don't walk into the trap of giving them something that they can turn around and then say Duke sucks for X amount of reasons, namely this one. And it reflects on all of us. It doesn't matter where you're in Cameron. It doesn't matter if you're going to see me this week here in DC. Let's be Duke fans. Let's support our team. It's cool to go after players and kind of say, hey, RJ, you're going to have a bad day tonight. Right? RJ had a bad day. That's cool. You can go after him for stuff like that. But don't take it low. Don't take it to the classless level where at the end of the day, everyone's just going to talk about your response to him. So that's how I'll leave it. Again, we love the Crazies. Jason, you and I were headline monitors. Jason was the first one. I was, in the middle. We are in deep with that. So it really pains us to have to address it, but it is only fair that we address it fairly, right? And this is something, as I'll say, All the other stuff that happens in other arenas should not happen in Cameron Indoor Stadium. This should be the last time that this happens.
I completely agree with you. You know, it dates back to 1979.
Mhm.
1979 was when Uncle Terry Sanford, wrote the letter to the Crazies and said, you need to be on better behavior. And that's where the "We beg to differ" chant came out. But there's an aspect of that was the Duke Crazies at that time admitting, by doing that chant, they admitted what we've been doing in the past is not appropriate. It's not acceptable. And standards have changed over time. I want to be real clear about that. Like,
Mhm.
there was a lot of vulgarity. There was a lot of
Oh yeah, absolutely.
very personal
There's
bad
there's
stuff.
some there are some stuff from like the 70s and 80s, even like right before you came, where like even when I was in school, like, damn, we did that. No, we
Yeah.
can't be doing that, right? And that's
Yeah.
fair, right? It's
People,
fair to call on the past and say that we've changed, but you can't regress.
yeah. People go out there and Google Herman Veal and Cameron, and you will read a story that you're like, I can't believe that the Crazies did that.
Mhm.
But my point was, over time, things evolve, things change. And our, what I did in the late 80s in Cameron would not be acceptable today. And I'm not saying there's a double standard or anything like that, but what's acceptable today needs to be what the Crazies do. And yes, be passionate. Yes, be loud. Yes, be creative, but don't stoop to the level of potentially violent or really offensive kind of language.
Or something that can be taken as such.
Yeah.
Here's a very quick example. As I know we don't want to belabor this point, but a quick example was my junior year in college. This was when it was Gary Williams' final year at Maryland, and I was across from him in the Crazies, and I just absolutely said, Gary Williams is getting 100% of my energy tonight, and I said stuff. And here's the thing: I said not one curse word, but I just said stuff that dug into his soul to the point where literally during the game, Jason, he ran on the floor to curse me out during the game.
Well done,
Didn't
sir.
get a technical for it, but ran off to like basically to F me, right? And I'm like, yo, I didn't say a curse word to you this whole time. But here's the thing: we won that game because Gary Williams was focused on me the whole time. And I didn't say a single curse word to do it. That's what Cameron was like. That's what was made it so fun, is that guys like, yo, these guys were just going at me the whole game. The reason why we learn the names of all the refs, it's not to, curse them out. It's to be like, yo, Teddy Valentine, what's good, man? What are we doing here? Right. And you'll get some cool
Exactly.
responses and some banter back and forth. But at the end, you want Cameron to be fun. You want everyone who comes to say it's a tough place to play. It's the greatest place to play college basketball, and it still remains that to this day. These incidents do not take away from that, but let's keep it the greatest place to play in college basketball by being Duke fans and being above all of the stuff that we saw the other night.
Okay. All right. Let's put that aside now. We can move on to the more pressing issue at hand, which is the ACC tournament coming up. Duke will be playing on Thursday. And no, Donald and I are not going to come give you a last second preview of the team that we're playing, because you should really know these teams a little bit by now. The Blue Devils will face either the winner of the NC State Louisville game. NC State Louisville and Syracuse. So Syracuse
Mhm.
plays the winner of NC State Louisville, and Duke will play the winner of that game. Donald, I focused a bit more on Syracuse because we played NC State and Louisville, like it feels like in the past 2 weeks or so. I have a pretty good sense of what both those teams bring to the table. Syracuse to me is the more interesting one, and there are a couple reasons why. First one is, like I said, we haven't played them since January 2nd, but the second one is Syracuse has actually been playing fairly good lately. Like, the team that we beat on January 2nd isn't really the team they are today. In fact, over their past 7 games, since February 13th, Syracuse has been Bart Torvik's number 38 team in the country. They're 5-2 over that stretch. This is a team that has absolutely found something. And, it's not that they've changed up their personnel all that much. In fact, they're down players, not, they haven't really added players. One of the problems that Syracuse has right now is that they've only got 7 guys who are really playing for them. And that limited rotation is a real problem for teams that are playing in a, day after day after day tournament like this. We will be playing them approximately 22 hours after they finish their first game against either NC State or Louisville. And That's not a lot of rests, considering they got 7 guys who are probably all going to be playing, can play the whole game. So that could be a real issue for them. But the bottom line is about this Syracuse team is that they are playing better than they were earlier in the year. And I really think that they're probably the team that we're going to see coming out of that NC State Louisville Syracuse little triumvirate.
Yeah, you mentioned that 5-2 record since February 13th. February 13th, of course, is when they beat Carolina at the Carrier Dome, or whatever, the JCA Dome is, whatever they call it now. But I also think when you look at just like the metrics, when you look at all the teams, right? Syracuse is on paper the better team than NC State or Louisville. They're ninth in the conference in offensive efficiency. They're 13th in defensive efficiency, but it doesn't feel like they've played that way. It feels like they've been able to clamp down a little bit as they learn the new era of the Autry system of more, man on man versus that patented toothbreak zone that Jim Boeheim used to do. So you see how these guys feel like they're starting to become better every single day. And that, Jason, is why Syracuse would be an intriguing opponent, because yes, we haven't seen them in over 2 months. As you mentioned, every team, we're a different team than we were on January 2nd, but so are they. But the fact is they have become a better team on defense, and that's why they've finished the season so strong. I mean, you remember they were down kind of in like the 10-11 range in the conference, and kind of pushed their way up into the middle of the pack because of how they played over the final stretch of the season. And yeah, they played NC State as well on the road, which is, as we know, a very difficult place to play. We ended up beating them, and so did Syracuse. So Syracuse has their work cut out for them against these teams, because the thing about the ACC tournament and any tournament is it's hard to beat a team twice, especially if you haven't seen them in a while. So you have to kind of treat it, if it is Syracuse, you kind of have to treat it as a new game, a new opponent, where you're looking at these guys and saying, what are the Judemenses doing? What are, the JJ Starlings? What are those guys doing to really make it where Syracuse goes and try to stop that? Meanwhile, for us, we have some injuries that we're obviously battling, and will Caleb Foster be ready? How will that rotation work if he is in the lineup? How will it work if he's not able to go? And again, it's the good thing is we just came off of a couple of Saturday, Monday doubles where we know how to get our bodies to respond. This is going to be the key. It's about persistence. It's about longevity. It's about stamina, but it's also about making sure everybody plays and plays maximum ability, so that when you win, you can rest guys as much as you possibly can, because you have a game in less than 24 hours.
Yeah, a couple other really quick things about Syracuse I wanted to mention. You say it's tough to beat a team twice. Syracuse has already done that. Both NC State and Louisville, they played them twice each. Mm-hmm. So Syracuse, to win, against the winner of that game, is going to be having to beat someone for a third time. That is really difficult to do. And it's worth noting, it's not like any of these games were blowouts. Like, they beat NC State by 12 once, but then they only beat them by 4 the other time. Their games against Louisville, they won by 6 and by 2 in those 2 games. So, yes, you're right. Syracuse is a higher seed, and they're I think clearly a better team than NC State or Louisville, but winning for a third time against teams that you were very close against is not going to be easy. And then the other thing I wanted to note about Syracuse is they have been playing really fast lately, like super fast. And as a result, you said they've been playing, they got better on offense, better on defense. They've really gotten better on offense. If you look at the point totals that Syracuse is putting up, like in their past 7 games, they've been in the mid 80s or 90s in every one except for their game against Georgia Tech. Other than that, they've been like 86, 87, 88 kind of points in all these different games, like approaching 90. And that's a team that's clicking. That's a team that understands what it wants to do on offense. Syracuse to me, I think, is a really, really interesting matchup for Duke. I like our chances. By the way, Syracuse is they're terrible at like defensive rebounding. They're terrible at preventing teams from getting easy 2-point shots. There are a lot of places that Duke would probably exploit Syracuse, especially on offense. But I think it's the kind of game it could be if we play Syracuse, and I think we will. It's the kind of game that could be a bit of a shootout.
And Jason, as you kind of, rise further, right? The kind of 30,000-foot look at the bracket. I think it's interesting that after this whole season, this grueling 20-game schedule that we had, and we had some bumps along the way, everybody we lost to in the ACC is on the other side of the bracket.
I love that.
We are 8-0 against everyone on our side of the bracket. Syracuse again, we won at home and we won by 20. And that was a game where Syracuse, again, they had those, they have a couple of guys who can shoot really well. Like, they just didn't do that. And we were able to get out fast. That was one of the games I think we had a really fast start and we never looked back from there. Of course, we beat Louisville twice. We beat NC State on the road recently. And then if you look even further, right, Clemson, BC, Miami, Virginia, we played each of them once. We beat each of them in those games. So it's interesting that normally we have that. And the fact that we've played, other than Syracuse and Clemson, we've played everybody in the last month or so of the season. But I think you always want to see that revenge tour, but also the teams that match up well against you. Them being on the other side of the bracket gives me a lot of promise about Duke in this tournament because, again, if we come back and we play well and we figure out what we did wrong against UNC, if you think about it, we might see them in the final or Wake Forest, or even, we won't be see Georgia Tech most likely. But like if Wake Forest or UNC get to the final, we'll be waiting for them. We'll have that revenge opportunity to respond. And I'm looking forward to, first off, starting off against whoever we see. I know Syracuse is probably the favorite, but we know NC State can put points on the board as well. And I would be interested to see if NC State makes it against Syracuse, how high that scoring that game will be. And, that's talk about a game in the 160s combined in scoring, because both of them have the opportunity to fill up, and they not really good matchups in certain places, right? NC State will have DJ Burns going just rickshaw on them. And then you have Syracuse, you have two guys who can light it up from outside. It's going to be fun to watch. But the good thing is, I hope that game, I think as everyone knows, I hope that game that precedes ours goes 4 overtimes. Everybody's playing 60 minutes of basketball or whatever it is. I don't do math. And that they're super tired, because I want them to have to really rotate and get down to the lower parts of their bench against us, because that's where maybe we can take advantage.
Yeah, and last note I have on this side of the bracket, you pointed out we are undefeated against everybody. The only team on this side of the bracket that really gave Duke even a mildly competitive game was Clemson. We had that very, very close, very exciting game against Clemson, won, in the final seconds. And everyone else on this side of the bracket, Duke handled fairly easily. So I like Duke's chance. I feel good about where we are. So Donald, really quick, I just want to mention one thing before we're done with our ACC tournament coverage. We've talked about other teams, Duke's record against them, and all that other kind of stuff. I want to talk about a couple Duke players that I think it's worth highlighting and paying attention to as the Blue Devils get ready to play their games. And that's Jeremy Roach and Mark Mitchell. Jeremy Roach, honestly, and I don't know whether it's jitters from his last game in Cameron or what, but he's been in a little bit of a slump from the outside lately. He's just 3 for his last 15 on 3-pointers. He was like right at 50%, just a shade under 50% on the season. Prior to that little slump, 3 for 15, 20%. That's not less than 50, 20.
That math doesn't math, Jason.
That math does not math. Yes. So one of the things I'll be looking forward to in this tournament is that hopefully Jeremy Roach can refine that stroke. You don't have to shoot 50%. I'll take 45. I can live with that. And then the other guy, as I mentioned, Mark Mitchell. Wow. Mark Mitchell has been in a major slump at the free throw line. I don't think I'm telling anyone anything that they don't know, but in his past 7 games since the Florida State game, Mark Mitchell is 15 for 34. That is 44%. 15 for 34 at the free throw line in his past 7 games. Ouch. Mark, by the way, earlier this year had a run where he scored in double figures in 13 out of 15 games. He only has 1 game scoring more than 10 points in his last 5. In January and February, Mark had a run of 8 out of 9 games where he had more than 6 rebounds. The only time he's gotten more than 6 rebounds in the past in the past 7 games was against Louisville, which was a blowout. That was like a non-competitive kind of game. We need Mark rebounding. We need Mark scoring a little bit. We need Mark hitting those free throws. 44%, man, we got to fix that. So those are 2 things. If we're looking at, what does Duke do to elevate? What does Duke do to win this tournament? I think those are 2 things that I'm really looking at for this team to, get back on track to where they were earlier in the year. Mark was a better rebounder, better free throw shooter, better scorer earlier in the year. Jeremy was a lights out 3-point shooter earlier in the year. I don't want to see that 20% 3-point shooting from Jeremy. That'll be a problem for Duke going forward in the tournaments.
For Jeremy, right? Like a week ago, and even leading up to UNC game, he's been talking for the last week or so about the emotions of this being his, final games in Cameron, his last week of the regular season, and just knowing that this was, this road is going to end for him at some point. And he battled with those emotions, especially during the UNC game. We've, as we talked about on this show, we completely understand that he was a little bit emotional and that it probably affected his play a little bit. No shame in that. We ask people not to
Absolutely
do that,
not.
but
Yeah.
there's no shame in that whatsoever. I do think that this is the time that we want Jeremy Roach to emerge, that playoff germ that we've had the last couple of years that we really love and that we were fortunate enough to see most of this season. We want that to come out in just in bulk and then over the next couple of weeks. I'm looking forward to seeing how he leads this team, right? Because he's a guy who leads by example. No better examples than this tournament, the ACC and the NCAA, to really show that, hey, again, just like some of the guys that we've kind of compared it to, like Quinn Cook, I don't have to do everything to put my team on my back and carry them to a Final Four and to a national championship. He has that experience of taking us to a Final Four. He has the experience of winning an ACC championship. I hope that he can bring out those qualities this week and in the next month so that we see that happen. And in the case of Mark Mitchell, I think Mark Mitchell, again, this time last year, we were seeing for the first time that, this kid is the most indispensable player we might have on our team. And we learned that the hard way by losing to Tennessee in the second round when the one game that he didn't start. We kind of, as a fan base, took him for granted and all the qualities that he does bring to the table. And when we didn't have it, that's we were like, oh, we were missing that. We were missing Mark Mitchell in all these different areas. I want that Mark Mitchell to return, that indispensable guy who doesn't need 20 points. I love it when he gets 20 points, but he doesn't need it. I'd love to see him get back on the rebounding trail, get back on doing a couple of blocks and having that energy on defense. And really even just, again, the non-stat stuffing categories, the things just locking up defenders like he has been doing, not fouling while doing it. As you mentioned, going to the free throw line, knocking down those free throws when he does get those opportunities. Because when he is at the top of his game, there is nobody in the ACC and really very few guys in the NCAA that can fully match up with what he does. And I'm not saying that because he's a guy that's going to score 25 points a game and get, Nikola Jokic numbers. But the qualities that he brings to the table are things that people have to bring multiple people to mimic. If he can get 5 rebounds and 3 assists and 3 steals and 3 blocks and 10 points, they need like 3 or 4 guys to mimic that kind of stat line. We only need 1. So that's the difference, is that he can be there in kind of in baseball where they have WAR, right? The wins above replacement. He's like, his wins above, his WAR needs to be super high in the NCAA tournament, in the ACC tournament, for us to really have a chance. I hope we're ready to see it. I think maybe we need some late night tweets. If you want me to do it, I can do it. But whenever that happens, he usually responds. So I'm willing to do anything to see us win.
There you go. All right, look, we're going to take a quick break. We're done with the ACC tournament. On the other side, hardware. There are awards being handed out, and Dukie's won some of them. We're going to have that news after the break.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Donald, we're back from the break, and the All-ACC teams were announced. A number of Blue Devils made the list. Not a ton. There are 15 teams in this league.
Mm-hmm.
So, it is not easy to get multiple guys on these teams. In fact, on the 3 All-ACC teams, UNC had 3 players, Duke had 2, no other team had more than 1. So it's hard to get guys on the All-ACC teams. By the way, Georgia Tech, Louisville, and Florida State, 0 players on the All-ACC teams. We should, of course, identify the Duke guys. Kyle Filipowski came in on the first team All-ACC. Jeremy Roach made the 3rd team. Congrats to both of them. And by the way, Jared McCain was a honorable mention. Not exactly super close to being on the 3rd team, but McCain got a number of votes from people who said he should be All-ACC. I think, Donald, the only mild surprise for me on the All-ACC first team, if it's even a surprise, Blake Hinson made it ahead of Armando Bacot. I absolutely think that Blake Hinson's performance this year, the success of that Pittsburgh team, especially the back half of the season, that Hinson deserved to be on the team. I'm just a little surprised that Bacot got knocked down because the media seems to love and adore Armando Bacot. And there was a friend of mine, by the way, that joked with me and said, Armando Bacot not making the first team All-ACC is going to have him playing just with a vengeance when he comes back next season for his 12th year in the ACC.
At a certain point, you're just ineligible for these things, right? Like you're eligible.
Don't tell that to Bacot.
May be cool, but like you're like, no, you can't win any awards.
Oh man. Anyway, what do you got on the All-ACC teams? And then we'll get to like the 6th man and Rookie of the Year, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think the one thing is, first of all, just as you mentioned, a lot of teams placing one player on some of these the 1st and 2nd, 3rd team just shows everyone how deep this conference really is and how there's a lot of really good players in this list, right? And when you look at Kyle Filipowski, it's funny. We talked about this with Jay Billis when we were previewing it was the first UNC game.
Yeah.
And he mentioned that we were like, yo, Kyle Filipowski's having a really down year and he's not living up to the standards that that we had for him and the expectations that we had. And he kind of said, well, expectations are placed on by the beholder, right? And when you think nationally, everyone's saying Kyle Filipowski's having an incredible year. And when you see the stats, he's having stats that line up against some of the greats that have come through Duke University in the last 10 years or so. So it's funny how we look at that. We go, I kind of look like, wow, Filipowski made first team, but it feels like it was pretty much a done deal that he was going to make first team because of the vote totals. He got 346 votes. Hunter Salas was 4th on that list and he had 292. So it wasn't close for him it wasn't like he was in danger of being left off the list. So congrats to him. Question. But it's funny how we want to elevate our players and demand like near perfection for them. But when you look over the grand scheme of things, we have to look at the fact that Kyle Filipowski had a really good year for Duke and a really good year in the ACC, and the voters showed that.
Yeah, no question about it. And let's get to some of the other teams or the other awards really quickly. RJ Davis of North Carolina was the runaway winner of Player of the Year. That's not a surprise at all. Flip, by the way, came in 2nd on that list. Defensive Player of the Year went to Reese Beekman of Virginia. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that I'm a little surprised. I actually think Ryan Dunn of Virginia deserved more consideration for that award and should have beaten his own teammate out. There were no Dukies made the Defensive Player of the Year list. The only guy I guess you would have thought had a chance at that, maybe Mark Mitchell. Although I kind of think if he hadn't been hurt as much as he was, Tyrese Proctor has had some really impressive defensive performances, but didn't get there. Rookie of the Year. Now, this is an interesting one. Marcus Burton of Notre Dame took the Rookie of the Year. He had 46 votes. Jared McCain came in 2nd with 20. And then Carlton Carrington of Pitt with 5. Caleb Foster, by the way, got 1 vote. Good for Caleb. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that I actually think, even though there's certainly a case for Marcus Burton, I think that Jared McCain would have been the better choice here. And here's why. Marcus Burton put up great counting stats, He scored a lot of points. He had a lot of assists, played a ton of minutes, all that kind of stuff. But he was not an efficient player. In fact, I know he had to carry a huge load for that Notre Dame team that did not have a lot of other good players on it and, was very young and struggling to find an identity and the such. Marcus Burton was actually a bad offensive player. That's just the honest to God truth. He had an offensive rating. Now, the offensive rating number on Ken Pomeroy's statistics is very complicated. Ken doesn't even, on his glossary, he doesn't even list all the things that go into it. He said, there's like a paper you can buy that explains how offensive rating is put together. But 100 is sort of an average rating. The average player on every team gets a 100. Marcus Burton had a 96.7. I want to be clear about something. There isn't a single player on Duke who has an offensive rating below 111. Not even, guys that you go, oh, Jalen Blakes doesn't really do very much. Even Jalen Blakes doesn't have an offensive rating below 111. Marcus Burton's was 96. Virginia, a team that's full of terribly inefficient offensive players, almost all of their team had ratings way higher than Marcus Burton. Marcus Burton produced a wretchedly inefficient number while leading the ACC in usage percentage and percentage of shots taken. Like, he never saw a bad shot that he wasn't willing to take. And he only won this Rookie of the Year award over Jared McCain because he took a ton of shots and made enough of them to score points. It's not because he played good basketball. And I'll tell you something. I actually would have been okay if Carlton Carrington of Pittsburgh had won the award over Jared McCain. Carlton Carrington was like 13-5-5 on the season for an unheralded rookie and carried a huge load for that Pitt team. I would have been fine if he'd won Rookie of the Year. But I think Marcus Burton is a bad choice because you're rewarding a player who was horribly, terribly inefficient. I don't know that he made his teammates better. I don't know that he made his team better. Jared McCain is like the opposite of inefficient.
Yeah, I think this is one of the two awards that I was most surprised at, mainly because, as you mentioned, Jason, Marcus Burton, take nothing away from him. He had a terrific year. All these guys on this list had terrific years. I thought Jared McCain's was better. Simple as that. I think Jared McCain had to do more with more pressure for a team, and he was responsible for a ton of our wins, right? He wasn't like he was just kind of getting his points off on the side while other people were cooking. He was cooking himself. He was in the kitchen. He was the chef in a lot of these games. And so with Marcus Burton, I also kind of ding the fact that, like, yeah, he was doing all those points, but like, what did Notre Dame do? Right? They're playing later on today, or they're playing right now.
Yeah.
So that sort of thing where I'm like, I don't understand just getting the numbers, because if it was just about getting the numbers, then no Duke player will really ever win, short of maybe like a Paul Banchero or Zion Williamson or something like that, because they have the pressure added to it, and I feel like that should be taken into account a little bit. I think, as you mentioned, Bubs Carrington, the fact that he was able to help Pitt alongside Blake Hinson and take on more of a load when they didn't think he was going to be a guy who was going to be a part of that crew. Marcus Burton was recruited to be the guy, right? He was recruited to be the guy at Notre Dame. Carrington was not recruited to be the guy at Pitt. And in a way, Jared McCain was not. I mean, he was one of the heralded freshmen, but he wasn't like the guy that at the beginning of the season we said he'd start, but we weren't thinking like, yo, he's going to be the man for Duke University. And he turned out to be. So that's why I would put him up there. It was surprising that it was such a disparity between those two.
Yeah.
But again, take no credit, take nothing away from Marcus Burton, what he did. I just, we're a biased podcast. I feel like Jared McCain would have been the guy.
Yeah, but Marcus Burton had one game where he went 4 for 18. He had two other games where he went like 5 for 18. I'm sorry. Can you imagine if Jared McCain had a game where he was 4 for 18? National headlines and Duke fans going insane about what the heck is this guy doing at Notre Dame. They didn't care. Yeah, go ahead and, it doesn't matter, man. I know that, like, the first team All-ACC team, they tend to skew toward teams that are better in the standings. There's a reason UNC got 3 guys on the All-ACC teams and Duke got 2, and no one else did that, because Duke and UNC were the top 2 teams in the league. I feel like these awards, Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Coach of the Year, all those kind of things. Let's maybe look a little bit at the standings and not reward a guy like Marcus Burton, who's just taken on a huge load by himself. All right, put that aside. 6th Man of the Year, Caleb Foster. Caleb Foster got 3 6th Man of the Year votes. I was shocked at this. Ishmael Leggett of Pitt won 6th Man of the Year, but Caleb Foster was on the list. I got a question for the voters. Caleb Foster started more games than he came off the bench.
He came off the bench for.
How exactly was he 6th Man of the Year? I'm not quite sure I understand this. Also,
I'm glad he got the votes, Jason.
I looked at his stats. He was better as a starter than he was as a reserve in terms of like his assists and his 3-point field goal shooting and stuff like that. He was better as a starter than he was as a reserve, and yet they're voting for him for sixth man of the year. Whatever, it's fine. I wanted to mention Coach of the Year, Donald.
Here we go.
Yeah. So the man who won Coach of the Year was Hubert Davis of UNC. And I don't understand this. Like, Coach K wins the conference, never gets voted Coach of the Year. Like, oh, it's just assumed. Correct me if I'm wrong. UNC and Duke were like side by side, 1 and 2 in the preseason polls. The expectation was that Carolina would be very good, a top 10, top
They
15
were ranked.
team this year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Duke was supposed to be a little tiny bit better. Okay, congrats to Carolina. They were in the regular season a little bit better than Duke. That's really, you're going to vote him Coach of the Year for that? I don't get it. I don't understand. I'm sure it's going to take John Shire like 20 years to win ACC Coach of the Year because everyone just assumes Duke's going to be great every year. I did want to note Jeff Capel finished second in the Coach of the Year voting. I would have had you tell me in the preseason that Pitt's going to earn a double bye. You tell me when Pitt was 1-5 that they were going to play their way to being on the NCAA tournament bubble and earn a double bye in the ACC tournament,
and that they weren't going to be playing on Tuesday instead.
Yeah, exactly. How is that not Coach of the Year? I don't get it. I think it's great. The other guy who was up there was Adrian Autry of Syracuse. I think Capel and Autry to me are two excellent choices this year. I don't really understand Hubert Davis, but then again, like I said, Coach, how many ACC Coach of the Years did Coach K win?
I think it was just like 2 or 3.
Yeah, it's like next to nothing. GOAT, greatest of all time. There were routinely years where he was National Coach of the Year and didn't win ACC Coach of the Year. That's just silly.
So a lot of people were saying that these votes for Hubert Davis were because of UNC missing the tournament last year and then opting out of competing in the NIT. Now, if you recall, Jason, in 2021, Duke missed the tournament. And the next year they made the Final Four. Won a lot of stuff. Got to the ACC tournament final. And I think that were we regular season champions or second, whatever we were. We got to the ACC final. We lose to Virginia Tech. And Coach K maybe got a vote. And yes, and they were like, oh, just because, it's Duke. Duke is expected to be good every single year. So is UNC. UNC was, just because they didn't make the tournament last year doesn't mean they weren't expected to be good this year. As you mentioned, they were 1A for the conference in preseason. They were in the top 15, 10 in the national polls. Everyone assumed that and then early on they played so well that they were already in the top, number 3. They were number 3 like 2 weeks into the season. This is a team that was supposed to be good. This is a team that was expected to be good. And this is a team that was good. We hate saying that part. But Hubert Davis didn't coach this team from oblivion and these guys that he didn't know. He had 19 ninth-year seniors on this team, right? You had guys who are finding eligibility in gutters so that they can stay on this team. Meanwhile, Jeff Capel, I thought, had a brilliant year. And again, I think the turnaround, what maybe hurt Capel was the fact they started out 1-5 in the conference. But why I think he is the Coach of the Year is because he took that team that, as I said, would be destined to be a team that I'd watch right here in a few hours. He's now playing on Thursday afternoon, and he doesn't have to play until then. And Pitt is looking like a team you don't want to see. That is the typical, that's usually the team that gets it, because again, Pitt was rated probably a little bit further down in the standings, or at least the preseason polls. They were rated a little bit further down, and they finished 4th. They finished above their expectations. UNC did not finish above expectations at all. So it's one thing if UNC went undefeated or something like that. You can check me if Coach K won it the year in 1999 when they went undefeated in the ACC.
I think he did. I think actually that's one year he did, because we beat the doors off it. We beat
the doors off everybody,
that
right?
year.
But UNC wasn't doing that, right? It
right.
took the final game of the year for them to be the ACC regular season champions. So, that was the second one where I was like, this seems way off, and it seems like they're rewarding the mediocrity he had last year.
Yeah,
and they shouldn't be.
That was going to be my point on this. If you're like, oh, but look what he did compared to last year. Last year, he had one of the worst coaching jobs in the country. For folks who don't remember, they were preseason number 1. They were out of the polls within 2 or 3 weeks. And they were so
fastest
bad.
Drop from a number 1 ever. The first number 1 team to not make this
number 1
tournament
ever. Yeah. And they were so bad that they were embarrassed to play in the NIT tournament. And now this year you're gonna be like, oh, they played to expectations, so that must be a great coaching job. Don't give me that. Come on. Don't make no sense. Unless you're gonna say we're ignoring preseason expectations and coach of the year is gonna be determined by which team played really, really well during the regular season. In which case we have to go back and give Coach K another 15 ACC Coach of the Year awards. In which case, next year, when Duke is preseason number 1, and everyone's like, "Oh, John Shire, all he does is coach those great recruited, coaching Cooper Flagg to being great wasn't that difficult." Don't give me that. Next year, you better be rewarding John Shire the way you rewarded Hubert Davis this year.
And here's the thing: John Shire got 2 votes, and I'm glad that he got 2 votes. I will tell you that as I thought he did a very good job coaching this year. He was not the ACC Coach of the Year, so I'm fine with him getting the votes to recognize what he did, his accomplishments. But again, Jeff Capel, a team that is below it's usually a team that's below expectations that blows everybody's socks off and go, wow, this team is actually much better than we thought. Like, that's the team that you're looking at normally, right? When Duke is up here and we're talking about Duke potentially being one of the best teams in the country, they're giving it to one of those teams that like exceeded expectations because we have expectations that are super high. And UNC is right there with us. So UNC can't claim, oh, well, he did such a great turnaround. They shouldn't have had a turnaround, is what other people would say. And again, when just the year before, when Duke makes the Final Four, coming off of a year where they didn't make the NCAA tournament, Coach K gets nothing. And again, it's probably because it's Coach K. But at the same time, Jeff Capel, I thought, was well deserving of this and should have at least gotten more votes to make this close. It should not have been as lopsided a victory for Hubert Davis as it was.
Hey, Donald, last thing I want to mention is this, just very quickly, ESPN's John Gasway. Every year.
Oh, wait, real quick. I just want to make note that I know there was a couple other teams that we didn't mention. The all defensive team, we didn't place anybody, but Jared McCain made the all rookie team. He was the second. He was actually tied with Marcus Burton in that category for the most votes for all rookies. So again, shout out Jared McCain for a terrific year, and glad that he definitely deserved to be on this team. And I'm glad that the voters rewarded him with that.
Yes. Thank you very much for correcting me on that. All right. Like I was going to say, ESPN's John Gasway, every year for the past 8 years has made a list of the 8 teams that he says can win it all. Now, look, it'd be real easy to just take like the top 8 teams, but that's not what John does. He doesn't give a huge explanation of why he picked these teams and not other ones. But in these 7 previous years he's done this. This is his 8th year. The 7 previous years he's done this. He is 7 for 7. And it's, that's not as easy as you might think. Like last year, he had UConn, and UConn was a number 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. Now, most people thought they were underseeded at number 4. Most people thought UConn was a pretty darn good team last year. In fact, coming into the NCAA tournament, Ken Pomeroy had them as his number 4 team in the country. So it's not like it was a huge stretch, but in terms of like where people were looking at seeding and stuff like that, it's not like Gasway's just been picking number 1 and number 2 seeds all the way. But the reason I bring all this up is that he made his picks this year, and among his picks this year are the Duke Blue Devils. That he says Duke is one of the teams that can win it all this season. By the way, he does not have UNC among the teams that he says can win it all this year. Look, it's not like this is written in stone or anything like that, but any dude who's gotten it right for 7 years in a row is worth noting. Although I will also note that over the past 7 years, tournament's been pretty chalky.
For the most part.
Yeah, but in the past 7 years, we've had 5 number 1 seeds win it, 1 number 2 seed, and then last year UConn was the number 4 seed. But like I said, they were Ken Palm's number 4 team coming in the tournament. So it's not like Gasway's been, plucking out a team that's the number 7 seed or something like that. Like, oh, look at this surprising club. He mostly has taken number 1, number 2 seeds, and that who typically wins the tournament, at least lately. So, but still, it's nice for him to have selected us as one of the teams that he says has a chance.
It's great. It kind of shows, again, we've talked about our ups and downs on this team, and it just shows that at least, and everyone talking about how bad the ACC is nationally, at least nationally, they're saying, this Duke team's really good. And this team, if they catch fire, everybody is in trouble. So I really like that fact. You even look at, the thing about the Ken Palm, the tournament the winners have always been like the top 20 in both offense and defense, or something like that. Top 40 in offense, defense. We're right.
I think it's like
we're right
top
in the
20
thick of it.
offense, top 30 defense, or something like that.
Yeah, and we're one of like 6 or 7 teams that are in that too. So this is a really good team. Like we have a chance to do something very special. Obviously, it takes a lot of execution. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of intensity. It takes a lot of luck. In a lot of different areas for us to win a national championship. But luckily, Jason, this is the season where we get to go and try and do that. So it starts on Thursday. We get to go to the ACC tournament, and then Selection Sunday is this weekend. We have a very busy schedule, folks. We're gonna be hearing from us a lot over the next week. But it's about getting that right bracket with the right matchups. And again, even when you do that, you still got to go out there and execute. So we have a chance to do something, but Duke needs to get ready, and so do the rest of us.
But by the way, Gasway's 8 teams are Arizona, UConn, Creighton, Houston, Kentucky, Purdue, Tennessee, and Duke. I don't know that there's many surprises in there. You know, Kentucky probably, you know, in terms of at least the advanced metrics and the such, is sort of the lowest rated of those teams. Creighton might be a little bit of a surprise. I mean, I think most people thought if you were going to take 2 Big East teams, it'd probably be UConn and Marquette, although Marquette's been banged up lately and not playing.
Tyler Kohler
well.
is a big, losing him has been a big deal the last couple of weeks for them.
Yeah, exactly. But in any event, so those are the teams that John Gasway says has a shot to win it all. And look, I'll take all the support I can get on this stuff. All right, Donald, that is going to do it for us here on episode 609 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. The ACC tournament is here. Donald and I will be back to do quick recaps and previews of all the games as they come back to back to back to back to back. Hopefully the Blue Devils playing on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Hopefully we're all smiles after that. And then looking forward to the selection show on Sunday, the best time of year. March Madness is upon us. For Donald, I'm Jason. Here's the Duke Band to play us out and take us home.